So I sat down and watched the entire interview that Brian Tyler Cohen did with RFK Jr. And by the time it was over with, I felt like I had a worm in my brain. It was pretty hard to watch, but a huge shout out to Brian Tyler Cohen for trying to present RFK Jr. with the facts and with evidence. Every time he did, though, RFK had a comeback, which was, I don't believe that. I don't believe the data you're reading. I don't believe the research that you're pulling from. I only believe what I see, which I'm not at all shocked that he would take that approach. But I want to start right here with this clip where he's asking him about what he really thinks his chances are. And you'll see real quick that RFK Jr. doesn't buy anything that Brian Tyler Cohen is trying to say. So take a look at this one.
Well, let's talk about the presidential run more broadly. Nationally, you are, based on an aggregate of polling, according to Decision Desk HQ, you're at about 8.5% right now, down from 19% in September. In Texas, it looks like just below 10% right now, down from 12%. In Florida, you're at about 7.5%, down from 11%. Nevada, you're at 9%, down from 11%. And in Michigan, you're at about 8%, down from 26%. So what's the path to victory here?
Yeah, we don't believe those polling results. And there's actually a very good article in The Hill today that talks about how the polling companies, the polling establishments have changed their methodologies to ask questions in a way that makes it, that dampens our poll results.
You know, I can actually agree with part of that. I don't put a whole lot of stock into polls either. And I do feel like that a lot of times the polls will frame the questions in a way that they get the answer they were looking for. But the problem I have with this interview and the problem I have with RFK Jr. in this interview is that every time he's confronted with anything, he doesn't believe it. He only believes what he sees, and he never actually shows what it is that he's seeing. And I just feel like that's a dangerous kind of mindset to have. That's the mindset that Donald Trump has adopted. Anyone who speaks ill of me is fake news. Anyone who says anything bad about me is crooked or conflicted. And I just feel like that type of rhetoric, when you have that built-in scapegoat to always have an out, to always be able to blame your problems on someone else and never face up to reality, I just don't feel like that's good for anybody. It's not a good style of politics for anybody to adopt. But on this next clip, it is really weird because RFK Jr. says that he will pledge to drop out of the race only if Biden will pledge to do the same. This is strange, but take a look.
Well, let me ask you about that then. You know, you had brought up the idea of a no spoiler pledge that you had put forward to President Biden to sign. In the spirit of this pledge, will you drop out in the fall if you're still polling below Joe Biden?
What I said is that I will drop out if President Biden agrees to drop out. If in a head-to-head race, he is losing to President Trump, and I'm beating President Trump, he will have to drop out.
So what you're saying is, if you're looking at this polling and the polling remains, and you've got poll after poll after poll showing, as we head into the fall, Joe Biden at a higher rate than you in these polls, that in the spirit of that pledge, would you be willing to if you're saying that you want him to sign this, would you also be willing then, just in the spirit of this pledge, to drop out if you are at that point?
I would.
Or you only do it if he does it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm willing to drop out if he signs the pledge too, and then.
But if he doesn't sign the pledge and you don't see a path to victory,
I'm not going to drop out. Of course, I'm not going to drop out if he doesn't sign the pledge.
So I'm really trying to wrap my head around this one to make it make sense. He doesn't believe in polls, but he wants a sitting president to drop out if he starts trailing in those polls. How does that make any sense? A sitting president is supposed to drop out based on polls that he himself says are rigged and he doesn't believe in. So I guess he's just going to look at his own polls. And of course, his own polls are going to say that Joe Biden is trailing. Do you see now what the problem is with this way of thinking? He's got a built-in out to say whatever he wants to, whenever he wants to, with no accountability. But I do applaud Brian Tyler Cohen for this next clip because he points out how that Timothy Mellon donated $25 million to Donald Trump, and he donated $25 million to RFK Jr. And Cohen makes the argument, why would someone donate that much money? Is it because they want you in the race? And at this point, the interview gets really interesting. Take a look.
I understand all of that, but if he's giving money at the same time, $25 million is no small sum. If he's giving $25 million to Trump and to you, and this is a Trump-aligned donor, and he's your biggest donor to super PACs right now, Do you have any relationship with this person? Do you know why he's giving you this massive amount of money? Because clearly this isn't him throwing his support behind you if he's also supporting Trump at the same time.
You would have to ask Timothy Mellon that with the super PAC. I'm not allowed to coordinate at all with the super PAC. But
do you have a relationship with him?
With Tim Mellon, I've met Tim Mellon twice.
Okay, and that was enough to. There's no other inclination as to why he's donating.
Like I said, I welcome money from everybody. I don't think that. Listen, I'm more.
You can understand how you can understand how.
Brian, I'm not sure what you're getting at, but President Trump. I'm running against President Trump. I have been a huge critic of President Trump's. I think he was a terrible president. I think he gave us the lockdowns. I think he shifted $4 trillion into this new oligarchy of super rich billionaires. I think he ran up the debt higher than any president in history. He presided over a chronic disease epidemic. He promised to get us out of the wars, and he brought John Bolton, who's the center of the war machine, to run the NSA. He was a terrible president. I'm running against him, so I'm not sure what point you're trying to get at. But I think the
point is obvious just from a layman's perspective. If you have a Trump donor who's also propping up the super PAC affiliated with you, that it would suggest that that person wants you on the ballot because he would perceive it as deriving benefit for Donald Trump.
Well, that's what you say. I don't think that is obvious. I think maybe that.
So if he truly thinks that Donald Trump is such a terrible president and did such a bad job, then why would he want to get in the middle of this race and risk hurting Joe Biden and giving Donald Trump another 4 years? That is the question that I would love to hear him answer. And I'm sure his answer will be something along the lines of, well, I think I can do a better job than Joe Biden. And I know there's a whole lot of people out there who wants to see more options than just Democrat or Republican. And hey, look, I get it. I totally understand that people want more choices and to have different options to choose from. But right now, where we stand in May of 2024 is this is the system that we have. And the election coming up in November, we're not going to be able to change the entire system between now and November. We have to work with what we have. And if we vote for Joe Biden, I really feel like we will live to vote another day. And I can't say the same about Donald Trump. So what I will never understand is these people who will talk about how bad Donald Trump is, how terrible he is for the country, what a disaster he was, but they're okay with getting in the middle of this thing, messing it up, and risk him getting 4 more years. Even if I completely disagreed with Joe Biden, you know what I would be doing if I was in any candidate out there's shoes? I would be saying, okay, I'm just going to sit back on the ropes. I'm going to wait until this one's over. And then I'm going to come back in 2028 and I'm going to tell the Democrats, hey, I'm the guy you need. But I wouldn't get in there now at this particular point and mess up such an important election. But when I saw this interview, I knew that eventually Brian Tyler Cohen would get around to talking with him about COVID and about vaccines. And I knew it was going to be bad. But listen really close to what RFK Jr. says in this next clip, because it truly is disturbing.
Because there was a clear delineation. There was a clear delineation between Fox News watchers, for example, who had higher death rates than those who were not watching Fox News, who were not consuming right-wing media, who had higher survival rates.
Well, I wouldn't say that the highest death rates in this country was in New York, which is a blue state.
Right, but that was in the beginning before there was a vaccine. At the end of the pandemic, it was actually in Florida, led by Ron DeSantis, who is, of course, a major opponent of any vaccines.
Well, Florida would have you would expect Florida to have the highest death rate. I'm not sure that it did. I know that Florida outperformed California, and they're roughly equivalent in size, but Florida has a much older population, and those were people who would die from COVID. So I think what you're saying about red state or blue state, that there is no study that, there are lots of other, there's more obesity in red states, there's more elderly people in Florida, so there are a lot of covariables.
You don't think politics played any role in the acceptance or refusal of vaccines in the aftermath of COVID?
I do, but I don't think vaccines had a benefit. I don't think there's any data that show that the vaccines had a beneficial impact on the reduction of COVID or survivability of the COVID. I'd love to see the study if you can show it to me.
I'll be happy to put it on the screen. I obviously can't grab it.
All the data.
That clip right there is why I will always believe that RFK Jr. was put in this race to be a spoiler. I will always feel that, because how could he sit there with a straight face and say there's been no evidence to show that the vaccine helped with COVID? Of course, when Brian Tyler Cohen brings it on the screen, he's not going to accept it. He's not going to agree with the CDC or their methods. So he's always got that built-in scapegoat. He's always got that built-in out. And it's just a dangerous way of thinking. And to anyone that thinks that virus didn't become politicized, it absolutely did. We watched it happen. I remember I was so naive, folks, when it very first started. I thought this is going to be the thing that will unite us. This will be the thing that finally brings us together, because it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter if you're progressive, liberal, conservative, atheist, Christian, whatever you are. No one wants to get sick. We will all want to get better, and we'll all work together. Boy, was I wrong. The next thing you know, Donald Trump is telling us that the virus hates heat and it'll be over by Easter. And he's on audio talking about how that he knew COVID was a bigger threat, but he didn't want to tell us about that because he didn't want to get us all worked up. We watched it become politicized to the point that if you got the vaccine, you was a liberal, and if you didn't, you was a Republican. And that's just, I don't see how anyone can argue with that for a second. We watched it happen, and it's still that way to this day. I will have people ask me if I'm vaccinated, and if I say, yeah, I can tell by the way they look at me which side of the aisle they fall on. It doesn't take me long to figure out who they voted for in the last election. So it absolutely did get politicized. But there's one more short clip here of RFK Jr. saying something pretty disturbing that I want you to see, because, yeah, he absolutely agrees with Donald Trump. Take a look.
Donald Trump has come out and said that he wouldn't fund schools that mandated certain vaccines. Do you agree with that decision?
Yeah, I do.
You know, that may be the only time that he actually gave a straight answer to anything, and that's pretty terrifying. But folks, when I see RFK Jr., I clearly see a spoiler. I see someone who has been put here to disrupt things and to muddy the waters, distort the arguments. I feel like that he is put here to create this illusion that both sides are the same. Folks, both sides are not the same. You have one side who is echoing words of the Fuhrer. Donald Trump has called for a unified Reich. He puts out an ad with the words unified Reich, a fourth Reich in America, talking about rooting out the vermin and poisoning the blood. He is pulling straight from the Fuhrer's handbook. He has talked about how he would terminate the Constitution whenever he saw fit, how he would like to be dictator for just one day. That's not how our system works. It's not how it was ever intended to work. And we're not going to stand back and let democracy die. We're not. We're going to go to the polls in November, and we're going to vote on the side of democracy. So when someone tries to say, oh, both sides are the same, I don't buy into that bullshit. But that's what RFK Jr. is doing. There's a whole lot of people who aren't paying attention to what Donald Trump is doing. They're not paying attention to what's really going on in the world. And they will hear their coworker or their friends or their family arguing about things. And they'll say, well, I'm just going to stay out of it. Both sides seems to be crooked to me, so I'm just going to vote for RFK Jr. The only people that's truly going to vote for RFK Jr. are the uninformed, the misinformed, and the people that just wants to burn it all to the ground. Well, I don't want to. I want to save our democracy, and I want us to all get a chance to vote another day. And I will accept the election results if a Republican president wins. You know, I'm not going to sit here and cook up every conspiracy theory like they do and come up with that crap. And for those that says, oh, the left does it too, they said 2016 was rigged. Did Hillary Clinton conceded? There was no January 6th event. There was no protest. There was no riots. There was none of those things. So those arguments are dead in the water too. And I just really feel like that RFK Jr. was put here to muddy the water, and he's doing a pretty good job of it. But don't be duped by him into thinking that both sides are the same, or that you're just going to set this one out, or you're going to throw your vote his way. All you're doing is throwing it away, and this is not the election to be throwing your vote away in. This is the one that it needs to count in more than ever. But again, shout out to Brian Tyler Cohen. You know, a lot of people ask me from time to time who it is that I listen to. Obviously, I listen to all the contributors on Midas Touch. But outside of that, I listen to Brian Tyler Cohen almost every day. I love Luke Beasley and David Packman. There's a lot of great guys out there doing this. Bo, the Fifth Column. A lot of people asking me about him all the time. So, yeah, I'm listening and watching all those guys, and I appreciate Brian Tyler Cohen, you know, going to bat and bringing the facts and bringing the evidence to him. That's what a true journalist is supposed to do. So, guys, be sure to go over and subscribe to Brian Tyler Cohen's channel, and subscribe to anyone's channel out there who has a voice of reason, who's trying to use their platform for the greater good. Because at the end of the day, we may not all be part of the same networks, but we are all in this for the same reason. And that's because we care about this country and we care about our democracy.